I still remember the exact moment I realized my family wasn't grieving my death in waiting, they were shopping for it. The room was full of polite faces and false sympathy, but beneath the soft voices and folded hands, there was hunger. Greedy heirs don't rush you, they wait. They smile. Do you like this story? Subscribe channel and get more videos. They count. And I was the number standing between them and everything I owned. It started quietly, the way betrayal always does. A casual question about my will. A suggestion from my nephew that it might be good to simplify things. My niece offering to help organize my finances, her eyes lingering just a second too long on the documents in my safe. Even my own sister, the one who used to borrow money and never repay it, suddenly became attentive, calling every morning, asking about my health, reminding me how much the family loved me. Love, I learned, sounds very different when it's attached to inheritance. At the family gathering, they didn't even try to hide it anymore. Over dinner, while the food was still warm, they began dividing my life as if I were already gone. The house by the lake. The investment accounts. The antique jewelry passed down through generations. Each item was discussed with enthusiasm, like prizes at an auction. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked how I felt. They assumed silence meant weakness. They assumed age meant confusion. They assumed wrong. I watched them carefully, memorizing every comment, every laugh, every careless admission. One said, "At least we'll finally be comfortable." Another joked, "She won't need it where she's going." They didn't notice my hands gripping the edge of the table. They didn't see the calm settling over me, the kind that comes right before a storm. That night, alone in my room, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted my estate so badly, I would give them exactly what they asked for. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Not to complain, not to threaten, but to plan. I told him I wanted a new will drafted immediately. He asked if I was feeling pressured. I told him no, I was feeling clear. Clear about who deserved what. Clear about loyalty, greed, and consequences. He listened quietly as I listed names and instructions, raising his eyebrows only once when I said I wanted a special clause added, one sentence placed at the very end. A sentence that would make everything else make sense. Word spread fast. Families like mine have a talent for sensing opportunity. Suddenly, everyone was kind again. Gifts appeared. Apologies were offered for old arguments. They thought they'd won. They thought generosity was my surrender. When I told them the will had been updated, their excitement was impossible to hide. They began calling themselves heirs openly, already spending money that wasn't theirs. I let them. Hope can be a powerful teacher. The day of the reading arrived sooner than they expected. The lawyer's office was packed, every chair filled with someone who believed they were about to get rich. I sat quietly at the end of the table, observing. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading, his voice calm and professional, the kind that makes people sit a little straighter and listen harder. With every sentence, the tension in the room grew thicker. Names were called, assets were listed. My sister received a generous sum. My nephew was awarded the lake house. My niece was granted the investment accounts she had once pretended not to understand. With each announcement, smiles spread across their faces, eyes lighting up with triumph. They exchanged glances, subtle nods, the silent celebration of people who believe they have outsmarted fate. I remained still, hands folded in my lap, watching them claim their victory before it was complete. They didn't notice how carefully the lawyer paused between paragraphs, how his fingers tightened around the paper as he reached the final page. To them, this was just a formality, the last obstacle before their new lives began. They were already imagining luxury, freedom, and status, convinced that greed had finally paid off. When the lawyer reached the end, he hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. The room went quiet. My nephew frowned. My sister shifted in her chair. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, reread the last line silently, then looked up at me. Our eyes met, and I gave him a small nod. That was his cue. He read the final sentence aloud. It stated, clearly and without room for interpretation, that every inheritance listed was conditional. Each heir would receive exactly what they had been granted only if they met one requirement: they were forbidden from selling, transferring, or profiting from any asset for a period of 10 years. Any violation would result in the immediate forfeiture of their share, which would then be donated entirely to charities I had personally selected. And there was more. The assets were to be placed under strict legal supervision, with regular audits and zero flexibility. The reaction was instant. Smiles vanished. My sister's face drained of color. My nephew let out a short, Sharp laugh, the kind people make when they think they've misheard. My niece leaned forward, asking the lawyer to repeat himself. He did, slowly, carefully, word for word. This time, there was no confusion. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, questions flew, accusations followed. They argued that it was unfair, unreasonable, cruel. They claimed they had plans, obligations, expectations. My sister demanded to know why I would do this to my own family. My nephew accused the lawyer of manipulation. My niece looked at me as if I had personally betrayed her. I waited until they exhausted themselves. Then I spoke. I told them I had simply listened. I had heard their conversations, their assumptions, their impatience. I reminded them how quickly they had divided my life while I was still alive, how eagerly they had discussed selling, spending, and upgrading the moment they thought they were entitled. I explained that the will wasn't punishment, it was a mirror. They were getting exactly what they wanted: ownership without effort, wealth without love, responsibility without freedom. The lawyer watched in silence as the truth settled in. 10 years. 10 years of maintaining properties they couldn't sell. 10 years of accounts they couldn't touch freely. 10 years of pretending patience they didn't possess. The realization hit them one by one. This inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a test they were almost guaranteed to fail. My nephew stood up abruptly, pacing the room, muttering about loopholes. The lawyer calmly informed him there were none. My sister's voice cracked as she asked if I would reconsider. I told her I already had, many times, while she counted my money instead of caring about my health. My niece said nothing, staring at the table, finally understanding that manipulation only works when the other person is unaware. One by one, they left the office, their dreams deflated, their greed exposed. The lawyer remained behind, folding the document with care. He admitted he had never seen anything like it. I smiled and told him that age teaches patience, but betrayal teaches precision. As I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of expectation or fear. I had taken control of my story, my legacy, and my final word. They would spend the next decade trapped by the very wealth they thought would save them, while I enjoyed the peace of knowing that my life's work would never reward greed. And if they failed, if even one of them broke the rules, the money would go where it was always meant to go, toward people who understood gratitude, not entitlement. That was the sentence that froze the lawyer. That was the sentence that changed everything.